Alright everyone, it's time to talk about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch because a report came out saw it yesterday that it's considerably larger and more plasticky than previously thought. Now what this is that there's a convergence point within the Pacific because of the flow of water, I guess maybe because of the way the wind moves too, and it's sort of amalgamating this loose flotsam and jetsam style patch that's several times the size of Texas, in which there's an inordinate amount of actual material. It's human pollution, anthropogenic sort of stuff. And the thing is this, so when you think about the garbage patch, a lot of people think it's like a literal mat, like as far as the eye can see, it's like a landfill floating on top of the ocean. It's not like that, and I do realize some of it is like semi-liquefied gelatinous plastics that have broken down because of corrosion within the ocean over time, or they've been degraded by life forms. Biofilm develops on them, it slowly eats away at them over time. Okay, maybe in 100 years it would disappear. The problem is this: it's being added to every day. Trash is flowing, especially from parts of Asia. Not so much the US anymore. We've been pulling our weight when it comes to pollution, although there are some big ass landfills that occasionally you're gonna get some can tabs and some floaty plastic bottles and stuff are just gonna, one of the sides of the landfill spills over and ends up in the ocean or something. A seagull grabbed a piece of plastic and then realized it wasn't food, deposited it in the surf, and there it goes. It's off to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. You got problems with cruise liners and fishing vessels and stuff dumping trash. Some of it's biodegradable, although that can be a big problem too. And what I would say, my response to this is, my goodness, the governments of the world have completely abandoned common sense and totally failed on this issue. Despite the fact that this has been in the public consciousness for years, we now realize, it's actually like several times worse than we thought. And all of their policies to stop pollution have done basically nothing. I don't understand why people haven't moved towards more biodegradable solutions for packing food and so forth. We should be using, plastic bags are dumb. Why don't you use cardboard? Those bags, the brown paper bags, are much better. You could even use boxes. It would be basically just as convenient. There's really no difference other than the cost of production. Okay, it costs an extra 2 cents to make this bag. Okay, the ultimate cost to the environment is far less. One of the biggest problems, I've put this forth, I think 2 or 3 years ago. One of the biggest problems we've got in the world is still pollution. Now, this was big in people's minds. Back when I was a kid, it was pollution and deforestation. It wasn't global warming. It wasn't CO2 emissions. Acid rain was kind of on people's minds, although that is sort of taken care of in many parts of the world now. Like, it's actually, that was fully reversible. It's like, once we cleaned the smog up, there was a lot less acidity in the rain. Would you imagine that? And also, rain is very mildly acidic anyway, so, it's not exactly the biggest issue. The biggest problem that we face today is pollution. The fact that we're pumping the world full of material that nature cannot readily actually degrade, and the problem is, yes, those substances, in a primordial sense, oil-based usually, were always there. We've simply transformed them, but we've deposited them in such a way that they can do harm to wildlife. So that when that beluga whale accidentally eats enough plastic bags, all of a sudden we find it floating, like surf and turf. It's going to be a little bit of a problem. Governments have not properly addressed this. Western governments, European governments to some extent, US government to some extent, Canada certainly, Oceania. Outside of that, there's very little push for actually making these things work. That is, people still use a lot of landfills. They still recycle in centers that end up throwing out a lot of that potentially recyclable material at a net energy loss in some situations. It depends on the substance as well as being recycled. It also depends on which substance is being put out as pollution, how bad it is. There's a difference between a tin can, tin being, it's a metal, you might cut yourself on, get tetanus or something. Probably a little bit less harmful than dumping a bunch of plastics into the ocean. Ultimately, plastic is one of the biggest enemies. It's a relatively modern thing, and it's all-encompassing. It's literally everywhere. Plastics are used in basically every possible application you can think of. It's also petroleum-based, which is a little bit of a problem. I would think that our efficiency would be far greater with biodegradable solutions, or literally regressing back to the way things used to be packed. Glass can be recycled quite easily. potentially speaking. And I think brown glass, wasn't it just the result of the fact that they no longer had enough energy to divert to properly maintaining the glass manufacturing, so they just started reusing it, and then they also realized, I think, that it made beer taste better if you didn't put it in clear bottles. So it must have been pretty funny, like, now it's no longer sour and weird. Maybe there's some people, I wonder if anyone got nostalgic at the time for that. Or using a metal, certainly using cardboard, using paper and stuff. But when I was a kid, we understood that pollution and toxic waste and things of that nature and deforestation, the degradation of nature's ability to compensate for man's other endeavors was the big problem. Now they say, no, it's actually just man's CO2, which the plants can compensate for, actually. That's the big problem. The climate will go haywire and we'll all die and stuff. Well, if we all died off, I guess that would solve the climate problem now, wouldn't it? It would solve the pollution problem. There'd be no more pollution because there'd be no more mankind. Or there'd be pollution, but it wouldn't be the result of man's efforts in the world. In a very short span of time, only a little over a century, we've managed to lay waste to nature. There are parts of the world that are basically uninhabitable. The Chernobyl exclusion zone, some of the toxic waste dumps of China, some of the nuclear testing sites and dumps of the world, that you can't even get near them. It's too dangerous. There are rivers in India that will literally, light on fire once in a while. Famously, it's not even a joke. There is a river in urban India. I can't remember which river it was. And it's covered in like this weird chemical foam, and occasionally this chemical foam just combusts. It just burns a little bit, and it's like people burning trash in the open air, and you have those reprocessing facilities in China where they take vats of acid and dump electronics into them to extract the gold, and it's like some weird stuff goes on in the world. It's not exactly good for people, but governments have failed. They haven't done anything to address it. What's the biggest thing that they talk about? Oh, the Paris Climate Accord, we must save it. We must save an accord that forces Western companies to close up so that companies in the third world that don't have high standards when it comes to runoff, when it comes to toxic waste dumping, when it comes to worker protection, certainly, or anything else in this under smog filtration, they can do it instead. We'll just put the heavy industry on the other side of the world, tax our own people, and make a lot of money. That's Al Gore's idea. He just wants to make money. He realizes that what he's focusing on isn't a problem, number one, isn't solvable by the Western world, number two. It's a dead game. It's impossible to fix the problem. If anthropogenic climate change exists, it will continue. There's no way to stop it. We are doomed as a species. We have to get used to that. But there are things that potentially are also very, very bad for mankind that we can tackle. We've already done. We did it with acid rain. They have lots of acid rain in Beijing. You have almost none in the United States anymore. You get some pesticide in your rain. That's probably another problem we need to tackle. We can tackle the use of certain pesticides and herbicides that are killing off bees. We can take care of that problem. It's a no-brainer. It's not that difficult. We can take care of trash over here, pollution over here. We should be putting it through heavily filtered incineration systems and using it for energy. Make a lot more sense for a lot of that matter. We should be composting a lot more. Another thing, here's a big thing. Right now, people in some parts of the country can't even grow a fucking garden. There should be a federal law overruling all state and local regulations against doing so, and they need to muzzle the housing authorities too, because sometimes they say, no, you can't have a garden. You have to maintain your lawn, and it has to be a monoculture. A bunch of grasses. There's no bees there. There's nothing for the bees to eat. Okay, we allow you one 2x3 flower bed. That's fucking all, and you have to spray it with chemicals. If we see so much as one weed in it, we're gonna pump it full of chemicals for you. Then you wonder why all the feral animals there are so unfriendly. It's because they're fucking poison. They probably get brain damage or something from when they were puppies and kittens. We need better solutions to the environmental problems that the world faces. A carbon tax won't do it. Putting off the problem and saying, oh, well, we'll just put the industry over in Asia. That's not going to do it. And China doesn't want it anymore either. They're putting it in Africa. So now they get to deal with heavy industry and pollution. Oh, well, wonderful. Yeah, even more out of sight, out of mind, even further from the coast of the United States. It's probably why they want it there, so that people in Europe won't have to see it. People in the U.S. won't have to see it. We've done something about pollution. It's not here anymore. It's somewhere else, and 10 times worse. No, we need to deal with smog, and we need to deal with pollution. We got a pile of garbage floating around in the Pacific. There was one, I think, Dutch teenager, if I remember correctly, who suggested a giant threshing machine could go through and sort of grab it all up. And it would basically be like an oversized barge with a giant wheel on the front just to gather the trash. Now, you might occasionally kill a fish or even like a whale or something. That's terrible, but you could clean up the pollution. The bigger solution is just not create it in the first place. There's a lot of waste that will never degrade, or it'll take 100,000 years to degrade. Why are we even producing these things anymore? No longer necessary. We should go back to glass and metal and things that are more natural. I'm not one of those homeopath lovers that says, well, natural is automatically better. Well, yeah, cinnabar is, you can find that in nature. I wouldn't recommend eating a bunch of it. You could eat a bunch of lead. That's perfect. It's formed within the earth. It's totally natural. You take that chunk of lead and just start licking it. Probably not a great thing to do. Yeah, go to a sulfuric pond or something, start lapping that up and see what happens. It's not going to be good. Radioactivity is natural. A lot of it's been deposited because of man, but it was there to begin with. The radioactive materials, the uranium and stuff, uranophane was already there. I'm not a believer in that, but insofar as it's biodegradable or less harmful for animals and plants or other life forms, absolutely we should switch to it. And then you should use bioremediation when possible. There's studies ongoing right now with regards to the use of mushrooms to clean up toxic waste because they're easily capable of concentrating stuff like that. Certain plants are capable of doing the same thing through bioaccumulation. The biological life form is taking up poison from its surroundings. There can be a problem for humans with mercury poisoning from fish and things like that. But yeah, we need to do more. Governments obviously won't do it. People need to think about better solutions and begin implementing them. Start with composting and gardening. Yeah, and then you can get some nice tasty food. Sun-warmed tomato. It's better than any tomato you'll ever have from a store. That's about all. Peace out.